For 3 years, Vincent Callahan had one rule: no woman came close enough to touch his skin. And in Chicago, people survived by knowing which rules belonged to ordinary men and which ones belonged to him. I learned that rule on a Thursday night under the gold lights of the Langford Hotel, with rain sliding down the windows like the city was trying to wash itself clean. I was carrying a tray of champagne through a room full of men who spoke softly because they had never needed to raise their voices. Their watches cost more than my mother's hospital bill. Their smiles looked borrowed. I had been working there for 6 hours, my feet aching inside cheap black shoes, my white shirt stiff from starch, my name tag pinned crooked over my heart. Emily Carter. That was all I had in that room: a name, a tray, a reason to keep going. My mother was 3 miles away at Northwestern Memorial, sleeping beneath a thin blanket while machines counted the rhythm of her breath. So when a man in a Navy suit caught my wrist and laughed because I flinched, I did not make a scene. I could not afford one. I simply said, "Let go of me." He tightened his fingers. Not enough to leave a mark anyone important would care about, just enough to remind me that women like me were expected to smile through small humiliations. The tray tilted, one glass slipped. Champagne splashed across the sleeve of the man standing beside us. The rooms went so fast I heard the glass stem tap against the tray, not break, just tap. A small sound, a warning bell. The man in the black suit looked down at his wet cuff, then at me. He was tall to pale under the chandelier light, with dark hair brushed back and eyes the color of winter steel. I had served rich men before, angry men, drunk men. Lonely men pretending not to be lonely. But this man was different. He did not fill the room, he emptied it. Conversation stopped around him, shoulders lowered. Even the man gripping my wrist forgot to breathe. Someone whispered his name like a prayer people were afraid to finish. Vincent Callahan. I did not know what that meant yet. I only knew every person in that ballroom knew it for me. My manager turned white near the service doors. A security guard stared at the carpet. The man holding my wrist let go as if my skin had burned him. I stepped back, clutching the tray with both hands, waiting for the insult, the order, the kind of punishment a person with money could give without ever dirtying his voice. Vincent Callahan did not look at the champagne. He looked at the red shape forming around my wrist. Then he asked one question, low enough that it should not have carried, but somehow every soul in that room heard it. "Who touched you first?" I should have apologized. I should have lowered my eyes. I should have remembered rent, hospital bills, the envelope of overdue notices hidden in my kitchen drawer. Instead, I heard myself say, "A powerful man doesn't need to scare a waitress to prove he owns the room." The silence changed. It became sharper, dangerous. Vincent stared at me for 3 full seconds, and in those seconds I understood that I had just spoken to the wrong man in the wrong room at the worst possible time. But he did not smile. He did not threaten me. He only turned his gaze to the man in the navy suit, and the air around us seemed to lose 10 degrees. "Leave," he said. One word. No shouting, no drama. The man obeyed before I understood what had happened. Vincent removed a folded handkerchief from his pocket and placed it on the edge of my tray, not touching me, not even brushing my fingers. "For your wrist," he said. I looked at the white cloth, then at him. "I can take care of myself." His eyes held mine, calm and unreadable. "I believe you." That was the first thing about him that frightened me. Not his power, not the way the city seemed to bend around his name. It was that he sounded like he meant it. I walked away with my pulse beating in my throat, not knowing that before sunrise, the man grabbed my wrist would disappear from every guest list in Chicago, and Vincent Callahan would give one quiet order that changed the direction of my life. By midnight, the Langford Hotel looked clean again, as if nothing uncomfortable had ever happened beneath its chandeliers. The spilled champagne was gone. The silver trays were stacked in the service hall. The rich men had returned to their private cars, their private elevators, their private lives. I was in the locker room with my coat over one arm, staring at the faint red marks around my wrist and pretending my hands were not shaking. My manager, Mr. Bell, stood by the door with his tie loosened and his eyes fixed somewhere above my shoulder. He did not yell. That would have been easier. He only sighed, like I had become an expensive problem. "Emily, you embarrassed a guest tonight." I looked at him. A guest grabbed me. His mouth tightened. "You should have brought it to me quietly." I did say it quietly. He did not listen, Mr. Bell rubbed his forehead. This hotel survives on discretion. I almost laughed, but it would have sounded too much like crying. Discretion. That was the word people used when the truth made them nervous. He handed me a white envelope with my final paycheck inside. It felt too light. You are letting me go because I told a man to take his hand off me. He looked toward the hallway before answering. I'm letting you go because Vincent Callahan noticed you. The name sat between us like a locked door. I wanted to ask what it meant. I wanted to ask why a man I had met for less than 5 minutes could make my manager look afraid of the walls. But pride is a strange thing when you have nothing else left. I took the envelope, folded it into my coat pocket and said, then maybe you should be more worried about the men he does not notice. Outside, Chicago was cold enough to make my breath visible. The rain had softened into a mist silver under the streetlights. I walked past the hotel awning with my collar pulled high and my phone pressed in my palm, waiting for the hospital to call, because that was what fear had become for me, a ringtone in the dark. Half a block later, a black town car slid to the curb without a sound, the rear window lowered. Vincent Callahan sat inside, his face cut by shadows, his wet sleeve changed, his expression unreadable. Miss Carter, he said. I kept walking. The car moved beside me at the same pace. That is usually the part where people stop, he added. Then you must be disappointed often. Not often. I stopped under a streetlight and faced him. Are you following me? Yes. At least you are honest, only when lying wastes time. The driver stared straight ahead. Vincent opened the back door from the inside, but he did not step out. He did not order me in. He waited, which somehow made it worse. Get in. It is 38 degrees, and you are walking alone near midnight. I looked down the street, at the wet pavement, at the bus stop 2 blocks away, at the city that had never once made room for women like me. I would rather walk in the cold than sit beside a man who thinks every problem can be solved by opening a car door. Something moved across his face. Not anger, not amusement, something quieter. Your manager fired you. Your name helped him do it. My name does many things without my permission. That must be hard for you. His eyes lifted to mine, and for the first time I saw the smallest fracture in all that control. You do not know what my name costs. I thought of my mother in her hospital bed. I thought of rent due in 4 days. I thought of the final paycheck in my pocket that would not cover even half of what I owed. No, I said, but I know what mine is worth, and I am not selling it because a powerful man feels guilty. Vincent was silent long enough for a bus to pass behind me, spraying water over the curb. He reached into his coat and took out a business card, plain black, no title, only a phone number in silver. He held it between 2 fingers. If you need work, call this number. I did not take it. I need work, I do not need ownership. His hand remained still. There is a difference between help and ownership. Then you should learn to offer help without making it look like a contract. The card stayed in the space between us, untouched, until he finally placed it on the empty seat beside him. You are very careful for someone who is not afraid. I stepped back from the curb. I am afraid all the time, Mr. Callahan. I just do not let strange men make decisions for me because of it. The window rose halfway, then stopped. His voice came through the narrow gap, lower now. Strange men already made a decision about you tonight. My skin went cold in a way the weather could not explain. What does that mean? He looked past me, toward the reflection of headlights gathering at the far end of the street. It means some people noticed me noticing you. Before I could answer, his driver turned his head slightly. Another car had slowed behind us, its lights dimmed, its engine idling too smoothly for traffic. Vincent's eyes returned to mine, and the softness was gone. Walk to the bus stop if you want, he said, but do not look back. I did not look back, because there are warnings you question and warnings you obey before pride gets you hurt. I walked toward the bus stop with my coat pulled tight and my heartbeat counting every step. The black town car stayed at the curb behind me. The other car waited too. I could feel it without seeing it, the same way you feel a storm before the sky changes. At the corner, the bus shelter was empty except for a cracked plastic bench and an advertisement for luxury apartments I would never afford. The glass walls reflected my face back at me, pale, tired, stubborn. Then the headlights behind me moved slow, patient, not passing, following. My phone buzzed in my hand, and I nearly dropped it. Northwestern Memorial. For one terrible second, I thought it was about my mother. But the nurse only wanted to confirm a billing address, as if fear came with paperwork and late fees. I answered quietly, gave the same address I had given 3 times that week, and watched the reflection of the dim car roll closer along the curb. When I hung up, Vincent Callahan was suddenly beside the shelter. I had not heard his door open. I had not heard his footsteps. He stood a few feet away, giving me space I had not expected him to respect. "You looked," he said. No, I listened. His eyes moved to the street behind me. The second car stopped beneath a dead streetlight. Its windshield was too dark. "Who are they?" I asked. "Men who mistake curiosity for permission." That sounds like a rich man way of saying danger. He did not deny it. The bus was still 9 minutes away according to the glowing sign. 9 minutes can feel like nothing in daylight. At midnight, with cold mist on your eyelashes and a strange car watching you breathe, 9 minutes feels like a room with no door. Vincent stepped closer to the curb, not to me. "You do not have to trust me," he said. "Good. But you should trust the fact that I know what this is." I hated that his call made sense. I hated that the black car beside him felt safer than the public street I had every right to stand on. "If he's get in," I said, "it is not because you ordered me to. I know. And you do not ask where I live. I already know where you live." My eyes snapped to his. That is not comforting. It was not meant to be. It was meant to be honest. The bus sign changed to 8 minutes. The other car's engine hummed like a low animal in the dark. Vincent removed his phone, pressed one button, and said, "Not here, not in front of her." His voice was quiet, but the words landed hard. A few seconds later, another vehicle appeared from the opposite direction. A gray sedan with no flashing lights, no drama, nothing to draw attention. It parked between the bus shelter and the waiting car like a wall made of steel and silence. Nobody stepped out, nobody shouted. The other car pulled away so smoothly that I wondered if I had imagined it, but my hands were too cold for imagination. Vincent put his phone away. "Now you can wait for the bus." I stared at him. "That is it, that is what you wanted. Most men like you do not stop at what women want." His face changed again, almost too fast to catch. A shadow crossed his eyes, older than the night, heavier than anger. "That is why most men like me lose the only decent things that ever come near them." I did not know what to do with that sentence. It sounded less like a line and more like a wound he had learned to speak around. The bus arrived with a hiss of bricks and warm yellow light. I climbed on, paid my fare, and took a seat near the front. Through the window, Vincent remained on the sidewalk, his black coat dark against the mist, his gaze following the bus but not chasing it. I told myself that was the end of him. I told myself powerful men forgot ordinary women by morning. But when I reached my apartment in Pilsen 25 minutes later, the hallway light outside my door had been fixed for the first time in 7 months. The broken lock had been replaced, and an envelope sat on the mat with my name written in careful black ink. Inside was the business card I had refused, and beneath it, one sentence. "You may not need protection, Miss Carter, but someone has decided you are worth using against me." The envelope stayed on my kitchen table until morning untouched except by my eyes. I did not sleep. I sat in the blue light of my old refrigerator, listening to the pipes knock inside the walls and the city wake up beyond my window. Every ordinary sound felt borrowed, a bus sighing at the corner, a dog barking 2 floors down, a neighbor coughing through thin drywall. Yesterday, those sounds had belonged to my life. Now they sounded like warnings. By 7, I showered, tied my hair back, went to the hospital because fear does not stop you from being someone's daughter. My mother was awake when I arrived, small beneath the blanket, her white hair loose against the pillow. She smiled when she saw me, and for 1 second I was not a woman being watched by men in dark cars. I was just Emily carrying gas station coffee and a blueberry muffin because the cafeteria charged too much. "You look tired," she said. "You always say that. Because you always are." I helped her sit up and pretended not to notice the new bill folded beside the water pitcher. $2,800 due in 14 days. Numbers had a way of becoming monsters when you were poor. I tucked the paper into my purse before she could see my face change. At noon, I left the hospital and took the bus back south. I told myself I would find work before sunset, a diner, a bar, a grocery store, anywhere that paid by the hour and did not ask why a hotel had let me go. But when I stepped off near my block, a man in a gray hoodie stood across the street, pretending to read a newspaper in the rain. He did not belong there, not because of how he looked, because he looked at everything except me with too much care. I kept walking. He followed half a block behind. My mouth went dry. I turned onto a side street toward the laundromat, then crossed to the other sidewalk. He crossed too. That was when I finally understood the difference between being afraid and being hunted. I did not run at first. Running admits something your mind is still trying to deny. Then a second man appeared near the alley ahead, hands in his pockets, face hidden under the brim of a baseball cap. My body chose before my pride could argue. I turned hard and pushed through the side door of St. Agnes, the old church on Ashland that had been under repair for months. The sanctuary smelled like dust, rain, and cold stone. Plastic sheets covered the pews. Scaffolding climbed the walls like metal ribs. I moved fast between them, my shoes slipping on the marble, my breath breaking apart in my throat. The door opened behind me. One set of footsteps entered, then another. They did not call my name. Somehow that was worse. I backed toward the altar, grabbed the first thing my hand found, a wooden broom left by the workers, and held it in front of me like courage could be shaped out of a handle and a prayer. The footsteps stopped, then the front doors opened again, slowly this time, not with force, with certainty. Vincent Callahan walked in from the rain, black coat damp at the shoulders, his face calm beneath the gray light filtering through stained glass. He did not look at the men first, he looked at me. Not at the broom, not at my fear. At me. "Are you hurt?" he asked. I shook my head, though my voice came out unsteady. "I told you I did not need protection. You told me you did not need ownership." He turned his head slightly. The two men behind me lowered their eyes and stepped back as if an invisible line had appeared on the floor. No threats, no raised voice. Just Vincent standing there, and the whole church seemed to remember silence. "Leave," he said. They left. The door closed. Rain filled the quiet again. My knees weakened, but I stayed upright because I refused to fall in front of him. Vincent came closer, stopping several feet away. "Your forehead," he said. I touched it and felt a small sting where I must have scraped myself on the scaffolding. He removed one black glove, then paused with his hand halfway between us. I saw it then, the rule inside him. The restraint. The war. He could command men out of a church with one word, but he would not cross the space I had not given him. "May I?" he asked. My throat tightened. No man in power had asked me anything that gently in a very long time. Still, fear is honest before it is fair. "Do not," I whispered. His hand stopped immediately. Not slowly, immediately. He put the glove back on and reached into his coat for a clean handkerchief, setting it on the edge of a covered pew instead of handing it to me. "Then I will not touch you unless you ask me to." The words landed softer than they should have, and somehow heavier. I picked up the cloth myself and pressed it to my forehead. He looked away while I did it, giving me the dignity of not being watched while I shook. "Why are they following me?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Because someone wants to know whether you matter to me." "And do I?" The church held its breath around us. Vincent looked back at me, rainwater sliding from his coat onto the stone floor. "I am trying very hard to make sure they never find out how much." Vincent drove me home after the church, but he did not come inside, and somehow that made his presence harder to ignore. He waited until I unlocked my door, until the hallway light flickered above me, until I stepped across my own threshold by choice. Then he left without a word, his black car dissolving into the wet afternoon like a secret the city had decided to keep. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I stood in my apartment with his handkerchief in my hand and the strange ache of being protected without being held. By evening, I found out my mother's hospital balance had been paid in full. Not reduced, not delayed. Paid. The nurse at the billing desk smiled as if miracles came with receipt numbers. "Anonymous donor," she said. "It happens sometime." No, it did not. Not to women like me. Not after years of choosing between groceries and medication, heat and rent, dignity and survival. I thanked her, walked to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and pressed both hands over my mouth until the anger became steady enough to carry. Kindness should not feel like a cage, but his did, because he had done it in silence, behind my back, without asking what the money would cost me inside. I left the hospital and took a cab. I could not afford to an address printed on the black card he had returned to me. The building stood near the river, 40 stories of glass and steel. With the lobby quiet, my shoes sounded rude against the marble. No one stopped me. That frightened me more than if they had. They knew my name before I said it. An elevator opened by itself. At the top floor, a man in a dark suit led me to an office with no decorations except city lights, long desk, and Vincent Callahan standing by the window as if Chicago belonged to him and disappointed him anyway. "You paid my mother's bill," I said. He did not turn around. "Yes, you did not ask, no. Do you always answer like a man who has already decided he is right?" He faced me then, calm as winter. "Only when time matters." I crossed the room and placed the hospital receipt on his desk. "I am not one of your debts." His eyes dropped to the paper, then back to me. "I never said you were. You acted like it." The silence stretched. I saw a silver picture frame on the edge of a cabinet behind him, turned slightly away from the room. I should not have looked, but pain has a shape, and that room was full of it. The photograph showed Vincent younger, less guarded, standing beside a smiling man with the same eyes and a woman with copper hair in a cream coat. Her hand rested on Vincent's arm like she had once been allowed to belong there. "Who is she?" I asked before I could stop myself. His face closed completely. "Someone who taught me not to confuse beauty with loyalty." I looked at the woman again and my stomach tightened. I knew her, not from his world, from mine. 3 months earlier, that same woman had approached me outside the hospital under a different name, offering $10,000 in cash if I left Chicago before winter. She had said it like advice, like mercy. I had refused because people with clean gloves do not offer dirty money without a reason. My voice went thin. Her name was not Claire when she found me. Vincent did not move, but the room changed around him. "What'd you say?" I pointed at the photograph. That woman came to me. She knew my mother's name. She knew where I lived. She told me leaving town would save me from a story I did not understand. For the first time since I had met him, Vincent looked truly unprepared. Not angry, not powerful. Unprepared. He took the photograph from the cabinet and stared at it like a wound that had learned to breathe again. "Claire Donovan disappeared 3 years ago," he said. "The night my brother died, my anger faded into something colder. The city lights blinked behind him. Thousands of windows, thousands of lives, and suddenly mine felt tied to a death I had never been told about." Vincent looked at me and his voice was no longer an order. It was almost a confession. "Miss Carter, if Claire came to you, then none of this started last night." Vincent did not let me leave his office with only fear in my hands. He called for a car, but this time he asked before arranging it, and that small courtesy unsettled me more than command ever could. "May I have someone drive you home?" he said, standing beside the window with Claire Donovan's photograph turned face down on his desk. I should have said no. I wanted to say no. But the name Claire had opened a door inside my life, and behind it stood too many shadows wearing familiar faces. "Not home," I said, "my mother's apartment." He studied me carefully. "You keep a separate place from her. She moved into senior housing after my father died. I kept our old apartment because it was cheaper than starting over." The sentence sounded ordinary until I heard what was hiding beneath it. My father. Vincent heard it too. "When did he die?" 3 years ago. The room went still, not quiet still, as if even the building had stopped breathing. "What was his name?" I asked him why it mattered, but I already knew. Some questions arrived with the answer standing behind them. "Daniel Carter," I said. Vincent's face did not change, and somehow that made the truth worse. He walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and removed a thin folder held together by a black clip. He did not hand it to me. He laid it on the desk between us like it was too heavy to carry. On the first page was my father's name. Daniel Carter, taxi medallion number, accident report, witness statement. The words blurred before I could finish reading them. "Why do you have this?" My voice sounded far away from me. Vincent looked older in that moment, not by years, but by guilt. "Because your father drove my brother the night he was killed." The office tilted. I gripped the edge of the desk. "No, my father died in a traffic accident. That is what the report said. Do not do that." I looked up at him. "Do not stand there with your expensive suit and your quiet voice and rewrite my father's death like it belongs to you." He took the words without flinching. "It does not belong to me. Then why is his name in your drawer? Because for 3 years, I believed he betrayed my family. The sentence hit harder than shouting. My father, who carried coupons in his wallet, who worked 12-hour shifts and still came home with peppermint gum for my mother, who once drove 6 miles back to return a passenger's forgotten purse. My father, called a traitor by a man who could make a hotel manager fire me with a glance. You are wrong, I said. Vincent did not defend himself. I know, that stopped me. He reached into the folder and pulled out a copy of the official statement. The report said, your father changed the route. It said he made a phone call minutes before the attack. It said he was paid. My father did not even like online banking. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from memory turning into evidence. He kept cash in coffee cans and wrote every phone number on paper because he did not trust smartphones. Vincent's eyes sharpened. Paper? I thought of the shoebox in my mother's closet, the one she refused to throw away, Dad's old receipts, maintenance slips, the small tape recorder he used for route notes because he said the city lied less when you recorded it. I left Vincent's office with his driver downstairs and his silence following me like a second coat. At my mother's apartment, I found the shoebox beneath folded winter blankets. My hands moved through old gas receipts, toll slips, a broken watch, a St. Christopher medal, and then a tiny digital recorder wrapped in a handkerchief. The batteries were dead. Vincent's driver took us to a 24-hour pharmacy on West Madison, and I bought replacements with coins from the bottom of my purse. In the back seat, under the soft yellow dome light, I pressed play. My father's voice filled the car, thin with static, alive enough to break me. This is Daniel Carter. Passenger is Marcus Callahan. I think we are being followed. I am changing fruit to keep him safe. If anything happens, tell my Emily I did not run. Vincent sat beside me, completely motionless. The city moved outside the windows, indifferent and bright. Then another voice came through the recording. A woman's voice, smooth as glass. Daniel, stay on the original route. Do not make this difficult, my father answered, breathless but steady. No, Mom, that boy is someone's family. The recorder clicked, crackled, and stopped. I held it against my chest because it was the closest I had come to hugging my father in 3 years. Vincent bowed his head, and when he spoke, the most feared man in Chicago sounded like someone asking forgiveness from the dead. Your father tried to save my brother. I looked at him through tears I refused to let fall. And someone made sure the world remembered him as the man who did not. By dawn, the recording of my father's voice had been copied 3 times and locked in places I was not allowed to know. Vincent insisted on that part, and for once I did not argue. Some truths were too fragile to carry alone, especially when the woman who buried them was still breathing somewhere in the same city. I spent the morning at my mother's apartment, sitting beside her small kitchen table while she held the recorder in both hands. She did not cry when she heard my father say my name. She closed her eyes, pressed the machine against her chest, and whispered, I knew your daddy would not leave this world with a lie. Vincent stood near the door, silent, respectful, almost out of place among the faded curtains and plastic pill organizer on the counter. He looked like a man built for boardrooms and back rooms, not for a kitchen that smelled like toast, lavender soap, and old grief. But when my mother looked at him, she did not see power. She saw the shadow of what his family had believed about ours. Did you hate him? She asked. Vincent's jaw tightened. Yes, Mom, her fingers curled around the recorder. And now, he looked at the floor. Now I owe him the truth. My mother nodded once, not forgiving him, not punishing him, just measuring the weight of the sentence. By late afternoon, Vincent brought me to a private meeting room above a closed restaurant in River North. He said the men there were his family, his counsel, people who had repeated the lie about my father because lies travel faster when powerful men find them useful. I almost turned back in the hallway. My hands were cold, my throat felt narrow. I was a waitress with no job, no lawyer, no last name anyone feared. Behind that door were men who had probably never been corrected by anyone who paid rent in installments. Vincent noticed me stop. You do not have to do this tonight, he said. Yes, I do, Emily. My name sounded different in his voice now, less like information, more of the concern. I looked at him. For 3 years, people said my father sold a man to save himself. My mother heard whispers in grocery stores. I watched neighbors stop inviting us to cookouts. I buried him twice, once in the ground and once in everyone else's opinion. I am not waiting another night. He held my gaze, then opened the door. The room went quiet in that familiar way. A dozen men sat around a long table. Some were older, some young enough to still confuse arrogance with strength. Their eyes moved from Vincent to me, and I felt the judgment arrive before any words did. One man at the far end, silver-haired and broad-shouldered, leaned back in his chair. "This is the Carter girl, not Emily, not daughter, not person." Vincent's voice cooled. "Her name is Emily Carter." The man smiled without warmth. "Her father's name is not welcome in this room." My fear disappeared so quickly it almost frightened me. I stepped forward before Vincent could speak. "Then it is a good thing he is not here asking permission." The silver-haired man stared at me. Around the table, chairs creaked. Vincent remained still beside me, but I could feel the question in him. Would I let him protect me, or would I stand? I placed the recorder on the table. Small, black, ordinary. The kind of thing no powerful man notices until it ruins him. "My father drove Marcus Callahan that night," I said. "He changed the route because he knew they were being followed. He tried to warn him. He tried to save him." Someone muttered, "That report was settled." I looked at him. No, it was convenient. I pressed play. My father's voice filled the room. Static first. Then his words. Careful. Scared. Brave anyway. I watched faces change one by one, not because they felt sorry for me, but because truth had entered the room without asking whether it was welcome. Then Claire Donovan's voice came through the speaker, smooth and unmistakable. "Stay on the original route. Do not make this difficult." The silver-haired man stopped smiling. Vincent closed his eyes for 1 second, and when he opened them, the old coldness was gone. Something worse had replaced it. Grief with direction. The recording ended. No one spoke. I picked up the recorder, holding it the way my mother had, close enough to feel like family. "My father died with the truth in his mouth," I said. "I will not live with a lie in my..." Vincent turned to the table. "Daniel Carter's name will be cleared." The silver-haired man looked uneasy. "And Claire," Vincent's answer came soft, but every man heard it. "Claire stopped being a ghost the moment she touched Emily's life." I should have felt safer. Instead, my phone lit up in my hand with a message from an unknown number. It was a photograph of St. Agnes Church, taken from across the street, and beneath it were 6 words that made the room tilt. "Bring the girl where she began." The message stayed on my phone like a small black window into someone else's patience. "Bring the girl where she began." No name, no threat, written plainly. That made it worse. Threats spoken carefully have already been rehearsed. Vincent took the phone from my hand only after I nodded, and when he read the words, his face became so still the room seemed to shrink around him. The men at the table began talking at once, low voices, sharp edges, old habits waking up. I heard St. Agnes, I heard trap, I heard Claire's name spoken like something bitter. Vincent raised one hand and every voice died. Then he looked at me, not as a boss, not as a man used to moving people like pieces across a board, but as someone standing at the edge of a choice he hated. "You are not going," he said. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because fear and anger sometimes wear the same face. That was not a question. "No." "Then let me answer anyway." "Yes, I am." His jaw tightened. "Emily, do not say my name like it belongs to your decision." That landed. I saw at the small flinch he would never allow anyone else to notice. "Claire wants you there because she knows the truth is no longer buried," he said. "She wants control of the only person in this room who can make me careless." The men looked away when he said it. I did not. "Then do not be careless." His eyes held mine. "That is harder than it used to be." We went to St. Agnes just after sunset, not with flashing lights, not with sirens. Not with the kind of scene that would make neighbors pull back curtains and call the news. Vincent drove himself. I sat beside him with my father's recorder in my coat pocket and both hands folded in my lap to keep them steady. Chicago slid past us in streaks of amber and gray, corner stores, wet sidewalks, a man walk his dog beneath a broken umbrella, ordinary life continuing while mine felt balanced on the point of a needle. At the church, the front doors were unlocked. Inside, the air smelled the same as before, dust, rain, old wood, and cold stone. Plastic sheets still covered the pews. The scaffolding rose in the dim light like ribs around a sleeping giant. Claire Donovan stood near the altar in a cream coat, just like the photograph, her copper hair smooth, her face calm enough to be mistaken for kindness from a distance. She smiled when she saw Vincent. 3 years, she said, and this is who finally brings you back to church. Vincent did not answer her. His eyes moved once across the shadows, reading the room in a language I did not understand. Claire looked at me then, and the softness vanished. You should have taken the money, Emily. My fingers closed around the recorder in my pocket. My father taught me not to accept cash from people who hide their real names. Her smile sharpened, but her voice stayed gentle. That was the worst part about her. She sounded like a person offering tea while setting fire to a room. Your father was a driver who got caught between families he did not understand. No, I said. He was a decent man who recognized danger faster than the powerful men around him. The words echoed up into the rafters. Vincent stepped forward, and several figures shifted in the side aisle, not rushing, not striking, only reminding us that Claire had not come alone. Vincent stopped immediately. His hands opened at his sides, empty, visible. Claire tilted her head. There he is. The great Vincent Callahan, learning manners because of a traitorous West, asked nicely. I expected his anger. I expected that old coldness. Instead, he took one slow breath and looked at me. Do you want to leave, he asked. Not Claire, not the room, me. The question broke something in me, something built from every man who had ever assumed fear was the same as consent. Not without the truth, I said. Vincent nodded once. Then, before anyone could speak, he lowered himself onto one knee on the stone floor. The church went silent. Claire's smile faltered. Mine did too. He was not surrendering to her. I understood that instantly. He was removing every excuse she had to turn his pride into my danger. Power took my brother, he said, his voice low, steady, clear. Pride buried Daniel Carter with a lie. I will not let either one take Emily. Claire stared at him as if she had watched a crown fall from a man's head and could not understand why he looked freer without it. My throat tightened around words I did not have. Vincent Callahan, the man people feared to touch, had placed himself lower than everyone in the room so I could stand taller. I pulled the recorder from my pocket and pressed play. My father's voice rose into the church where Claire had called us back, and for the first time the walls did not hold a secret. They gave it back. Claire tried to speak over my father's voice, but for once the room refused to belong to her. The recording filled St. Agnes with the kind of truth no polished lie could survive. My father said Marcus Callahan was being followed. He said he was changing the route to protect him. Then Claire's voice came through, calm and cold, telling him to stay on the original road, telling him not to make things difficult, as if a man's life were an inconvenience and my father's conscience were a problem she needed solved. When the recording ended, nobody moved. Even the rain outside seemed to pause against the stained glass. Vincent rose slowly from the stone floor, not as the man who had entered that church with a city behind his name, but as someone who had just placed his pride down and found something human beneath it. Claire looked around, searching the shadows for loyalty, but the people she had brought with her no longer looked certain. Truth has a strange power in a silent room. It does not need to shout. It only needs to stand there long enough for cowards to recognize themselves. Vincent did not touch her. He did not threaten her. He simply said, "You will answer for Daniel Carter, for Marcus, and for every lie you paid men to repeat." Claire laughed once, but it broke before it became a sound. "You would choose her over everything." Vincent looked at me then, and his answer was softer than victory. "No, I am choosing the truth over the man I became without it." That was the moment I understood he was not saving me from Claire. He was saving himself from becoming another person who used power to bury pain. By morning, the official story of my father's death began to crack, not publicly all at once. The world does not correct itself that generously, but Vincent made calls that men answered. Files appeared where they had once vanished. A retired detective agreed to testify that the original report had been pressured. A hospital administrator confirmed that my father had arrived with his personal recorder missing, then somehow logged as destroyed. Claire Donovan disappeared into the legal system. She had once believed money could bend forever. And for the first time in 3 years, my mother slept through the night without whispering my father's name like a question. St. Agnes held a small memorial for Daniel Carter. Not grand, not dramatic. Just a framed photograph, white flowers, and a church full of people who had owed him silence and finally paid him respect. My mother stood beside me with her cane in one hand and my father's St. Christopher medal in the other. Vincent stood in the back pew, alone, no guards close enough to be noticed, no black coat trying to announce him. After the service, he walked up to us and stopped at a careful distance. My mother looked at him for a long time. "You were wrong about my husband," she said. Vincent bowed his head. "Yes, Mom, but you helped bring him home." His voice lowered. "He brought himself home. I only stopped standing in the way." She nodded, and that was the nearest thing to forgiveness she was ready to give. I respected her more for not rushing it. Outside, the air smelled like wet pavement and spring trying to return to Chicago. Vincent walked me to the curb, where no town car waited with an open door. He had learned that about me. Doors meant more when I could choose whether to walk through them. "What happens now?" I asked. He looked at the church steps, then at the city beyond them. "Your father's name gets cleared. Your mother's care remains covered through a victim's restitution fund, not through me. You get whatever life you want without men in dark cars following you." I almost smiled. "That sounds like you practicing not being in charge." "I am not good at it yet." "No," I said, "but you are better than you were." He accepted that like it mattered more than praise. For a while we stood in silence, close enough to feel the warmth of another person, far enough for respect to breathe between us. Then he said, "I used to think keeping someone near me was the same as keeping them safe, and now," his eyes met mine, steady and unguarded in a way I had never seen before. "Now I think love means making the world safe enough for them to leave, and hoping they choose to stay." I did not answer right away. Some choices deserve more than a beautiful sentence. I looked at the man who had once ruled rooms by making people afraid, the man who had knelt so I could stand, the man who had learned that power without conscience is just another locked door. Then I reached into my purse, took out his clean handkerchief, washed and folded, and placed it in his open palm. Our fingers did not touch, not yet, but neither of us looked away. For 3 years, no woman had reached Vincent Callahan. Then I came into his life carrying nothing but a tray, a debt, and a father's buried truth. I did not change him by belonging to him. I changed him by refusing to disappear, and sometimes the deepest touch is not skin against skin. Sometimes it is one person reaching the place in you where your conscience has been waiting to breathe again.